Recent historical and anthropological studies, and better still recent analyses of searches and studies, indicate that faulty interpretations of information have been postulated over the years. Most of it was due to wrong conclusions emanating from a biased angle and an attempt to propel a race theory. To this end, social scientists and various schools of thought, while admitting the mistakes and errors of the past, don't categorically admit their findings. It's deceptive to know that before the transatlantic slave trade, blacks were living in the Americas, and Christopher Columbus didn't discover America after, but it's still taught. All findings and research since the 20th century show the history of black people in the Americas is rich and complex, with roots that extend long before the transatlantic slave trade. Before European contact, diverse indigenous cultures thrived in the Americas. While the primary focus of early human history in the continent has often been on these indigenous peoples, there is evidence that African individuals reached the Americas before Columbus. Some theories suggest that the ancient Egyptians, among other groups, explored the Americas. However, some Western scientists argue these claims are not universally accepted and lack definitive archaeological evidence, even when there's evidence that several explorers from Africa made contact with the Americas before the well-documented voyages of Columbus. For example, there are legends and some fringe theories suggesting that early African sailors might have explored the coastlines of the Americas. During the Moorish occupation of Spain and Portugal, 8th to 15th centuries, cultural exchange and intercontinental travel expanded. The Moors, who were North African Muslims of diverse backgrounds, influenced navigation, scholarly activity, and trade in Europe. This influence spurred greater European exploration efforts in the Americas, indirectly linking back to African heritage. Some scholars have explored the connection between certain indigenous peoples and Africans. For instance, the presence of African-descended peoples in the Americas can be tied to the complex interactions that occurred in places like Mexico and Brazil, where indigenous cultures and African-descended groups coexisted and influenced each other long before the large-scale slave trade began. Notably, in the 16th century, individuals of African descent appeared in the records of the Americas. Figures such as Juan de Salazar y Espinosa, an Afro-Spanish explorer, and others traveled to the New World, contributing to the burgeoning societies. These early Africans in the Americas played roles in exploration, settlement, and the sharing of knowledge and cultural practices. Through the centuries, individuals of African descent contributed to the development of various American societies. They engaged in agriculture, building infrastructure, and influencing the culture of music, cuisine, and social structures. The blending of African traditions with those of indigenous peoples and European settlers created unique cultural practices that can still be seen today. Therefore, it's often misleading to frame the narrative of black history in the Americas by the transatlantic slave trade without acknowledging the earlier connections and contributions of African peoples through pre-Columbian exploration, cultural exchanges, and interactions with indigenous populations.